Hello and welcome to another pattern review. I think this is only my second pattern review on this channel and I'm hoping to do many more. But as you can tell by the title of today's video, I am going to be talking about my Juno Clutch by Petite Knit. We're going to cover my thoughts on the pattern, the yarn, and my finished object. I've had it off the needles for about a month and a half at this point, and I have used it quite a lot. So I am excited to share everything I have been thinking about with this pattern. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started with my thoughts on the pattern itself. As mentioned, this is the Juno Clutch by Petite Knit. It is a lacy dumpling style clutch. You start by knitting the bottom completely flat and then picking up stitches along the edges to knit the body of the clutch in the round. I had thought that in order to get this dumpling shape, I would be doing some increases and decreases. I don't quite know what, but that is actually not the case at all. It was so much more straightforward than I was anticipating. The dumpling shape is actually created by the clutch frame. So if you can see, I'm not sure if this makes sense, but you can see like the body is just a giant tube basically. And then the way the clutch is attached and the sizing of the clutch in comparison or versus the sizing of the knit piece is what creates the cute little dumpling shape. So I was very pleasantly surprised with that. And as you can tell, I'm sure it's obvious, this is my first time knitting a clutch with a frame. So I was unaware of truly how simple this style clutch is to make. In terms of the actual pattern itself, it was very well written, as most Petite Knit patterns are. Something I really appreciated is that she did include instructions for how to attach the frame and the lining. I think that's something that you should be able to expect in a pattern when you are expected to attach a lining or a clutch or some sort of external object. So I'm not sure if that's the norm or not, but having it in there just made it a much easier process. I have added linings to sewn bags before, so I do kind of know how to do that, but this was my first time sewing a piece of fabric inside a knitted object, so having the instructions there just made it a bit more of an easy breezy situation. Something else about the pattern, although I guess it's not necessarily about the written pattern but more so about this like lacy stitch pattern, is that it was so easy to memorize. You're basically doing the same, I don't know, is it 5, 6, however many stitches over and over and over again in like a 2-row repeat, if that makes sense. I'm trying not to like say too much, but it is a very easy pattern to memorize, which made bringing this project on the go with me in the car, on the train, really nice. I wasn't having to like bring papers around and looking. Once I had it memorized, I was on a roll. So that is something else about this pattern that I really liked. And it was also a very quick knit. I think it took me from cast on to attaching the lining probably a month, but I procrastinated on the lining for about 2 weeks. So I do think this is something you could make in probably a week if you don't procrastinate like I did. I will say something that I found to be very tricky with this was figuring out the clutch frame sizing. And I think that has more to do with the yarn that I chose than with the pattern itself or how it was written. My knitted portion, my little knitted stack, ended up being, I want to say, about the same dimensions as the larger size of the 2 sizes in the pattern. However, I chose to make this in linen, which has no stretch, no give whatsoever, whereas I think the pattern was intended for wool. So I think that the clutch frame size recommended for the larger dimensions, which I believe is 11 inches, was absolutely way too big for this. I ended up ordering, I want to say 4 different clutch frame sizes. I think I had an 11, a 10, an 8.5, and a 9.5 or a 10.5. Something along those lines. I have a whole range of clutch frames in my apartment right now. I think I have like 5 or 6 because I was just ordering so many frames, trying to attach them. It wasn't attaching, it wouldn't go all the way. Eventually, I think I landed on, this is either an 8.5 inch or a 9-inch frame. I got it to fit just fine, but there was a lot of trial and error with that. Again, I think because I chose a linen yarn rather than something that has a bit more stretch to it. I also think I did bind off my stockinette portion up here a little bit too tightly. I think I could have done a slightly stretchier, more forgiving bind off, and that would have also helped with attaching this to the frame. Another thing I wish I would have done is just given myself maybe an extra 1/4 of an inch, not even 1/8 of an inch, on this stockinette. I was really pulling to get it around the clutch frame, and I think like 2 or 3 more rows would have made a world of a difference for me. So those are kind of like my gripes with not necessarily the pattern itself, but with my process. Otherwise, I would say it was a pretty easy pattern, especially for an advanced beginner, which is what I would classify myself as. I think knowing how to read your knitting, understanding a little bit of like how the mechanics of knitting works is really helpful for this pattern. And I would say this is a great gateway into lace knitting. This was my first finished lace project, and the bug has bit me. I am working on another lacework project right now. I think I have 2 or 3 in my queue. So overall, I think just having a good foundational understanding of knitting is super helpful for this pattern. That is everything for the pattern. Now I quickly want to talk about the yarn that I used because I do have some thoughts on it, and that is Berroco's Modern Linen in the color Spice. This is a 100% linen DK weight yarn in what I would say is like the loveliest shade of red. I think Spice is the perfect name for this color. It's quite a like paprika-y color. As I said, I do have a few thoughts about this yarn. I do really like it. However, I did find it to be quite splitty. It split very easily, which did make it a little annoying to work with. But that was something I was able to move past, especially for such a small project. I think if I were working on a garment with this yarn, I wouldn't love that. I think it would make it quite frustrating to work on like a full t-shirt in this yarn, but a little garment, like it wasn't the end of the world. Another issue I had with it was that it was quite stiff and even a little rough when working with it on the needles. Not that it was uncomfortable to work with, but again, something to keep in mind. I will say that it softened up quite a bit after I blocked it, and I really like how it feels now after being blocked and having, been used quite a few times. It's really got like a nice soft summer linen feel to it now. Aside from those two things, I do think I would knit with this yarn again. I would love to make another, honestly, like another Juno Clutch with this yarn because I do think it is a really nice yarn for this pattern. I think it's a lovely combo. So those two things were more so like minor annoyances than major deterrents for me, but I think 2 things to keep in mind if you are considering working with this yarn. Okay, so now I want to talk about my finished object, the item itself, the clutch itself, this physical item in front of me, and my thoughts on it, my feelings about it, which I have many. I have so much love for this clutch. As I said, I think it's been off of my needles for about a month and a half, or fully finished for about a month and a half, and I have used it countless times. I brought it with me to Spain for 2 weeks and wore it, I want to say every other night while I was there. I've worn it maybe 5 or 6 times since being back from Spain. It's been around the city a little bit, and it has just been the perfect summer clutch for me. I'm typically not a clutch girl, but I don't know, something about this, I'm obsessed with it. I can't stop looking at it. I want to plan all of my outfits around it, and I am just so pleased with it. Obviously, it's a little bit floppy, which is, I think, one downside, so it doesn't really have a ton of structure. Well, I don't know. I guess it kind of does when you're holding it like this. I do have in it right now my green poncho just to give it some shape, but this is what it looks like when nothing is in it. It's just like a floppy flat little pancake. I am thinking about making a little felted, I don't know what you would call it, pouch type of thing to put on the bottom just to give it a little bit more shape, because I do want it to hold its shape even when it's not in use or when I only have like a credit card and a lip gloss in it. So that is one downside of this to me, is that I just wish it had a little bit more structure. But otherwise, I think it is perfect. It has held up really well. As I've said, I brought it abroad with me for 2 weeks, wore it a lot there. I've worn it a lot in the city. It's seen a lot in its short life so far, and I'm sure it will see much, much more. And I haven't really noticed any pilling or any major issues with like wear and tear on the yarn. There's one spot, which I can't find it right now. If I can, I'll do a close-up. I snagged it on something, and so there was like a little snag, but I took my snag nabbit, which if you don't have a snag nabbit, I would highly recommend you get one. I just took that and poked it back in, and it seemed to be just fine. So I think it's held up really well. I see myself getting the most wear out of this June through October. I think the color makes it a bit more fall friendly, whereas the material and I think the style make it a bit more summery. So I think I can get away with it through mid-October. Once I start wearing like big wool coats, I think that will be my sign that it's time to put this away for the season, but I do think this will get a solid like 5 or so months use out of the year. And while we're talking about, I guess, when I would wear it, I wanted to share a little bit about what I would wear it with, or what I have worn it with, because it actually goes with a bunch of different things. I have worn it with a bright green chartreusey linen dress, with a navy linen dress. I've worn it with jeans and like a white tube top or tank top t-shirt. I think it just pairs really well with a lot of colors in my wardrobe, which tend to be whites, blues, blacks, browns, grays. It is a really, really lovely complement for all of those colors. So that's how I've worn it so far. I can see myself wearing it with like jeans and boots and a cute cardigan in early fall. I think it'll be a lovely little evening bag for September and the transitional season that we're entering into in like a month. So those are my thoughts on the pattern, the yarn, and this finished object. Obviously, I love it so much. I quickly want to wrap by just telling you what the total cost of this was for me, as well as give like a final overall rating for the different categories I talked about. So how much did this cost me? The pattern was around $8 on Ravelry. I paid $26 for the yarn. The clutch frame, I'm going to say, was $5, even though I probably spent about $30 on clutch frames. The one I ended up using was in a 2-pack for $10, so that is $5 for the frame. And then the lining fabric, I'm going to say $0 because I already had it in my fabric stash. I just used a like a muslin cotton fabric. I didn't use anything fancy at all. So I'm going to say that was $0. But you can buy muslin from Mood, or I'm sure like other fabric stores, for like $3 to $6. Like it's a very affordable fabric to buy. So my all-in cost for this clutch here is $39 US. I think that's a pretty good deal. I have seen dumpling bags at Anthropologie for much more, so I am very pleased with my $39. I didn't include my labor in the total price because I didn't really track how long it took me. I just didn't feel like it. Sometimes I feel like it, sometimes I don't, but I think just in terms of what I spent $39 to make this. Okay, now the last part, my final ratings. I'm going to rate pattern satisfaction, yarn satisfaction, finished object satisfaction / wearability, and then I will give the overall score for this pattern. So pattern satisfaction, I am giving it a 5 out of 5. I don't think anything was missing from the pattern. It was super straightforward. Yarn satisfaction, I think a 3.5 out of 5. I like how it looks and feels in the finished object. I think working with it was a little finicky and a little annoying, so that's why I knocked 1.5 points off of the yarn satisfaction score. My finished object satisfaction, I think you can guess, it is a 5 out of 5. I love it. I think it is perfect. So that brings my overall rating, if I did my math correctly, to a 4.5 out of 5, which I think is an excellent score. So that is everything on my Juno Clutch. If you have made it, please let me know. I'd love to see yours. Link your Ravelry project, or if you've posted about it, link your post down below. I think it is such a fantastic clutch and definitely one to add to your queue if you're looking for a little dumpling clutch pattern. So that is everything. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are interested in more knitting content or pattern reviews, I would greatly appreciate if you considered subscribing to my channel. I am hoping to post more pattern reviews, maybe one a month would be ideal. So if this is something you like, this might be a place to be. But that is all from me. So thank you again, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.